I was wiping down the glass table when I first heard the laughter, sharp, confident, echoing down the hallway of my husband's office building. I knew that laugh. It wasn't mine. It hadn't been mine in a long time. Moments later, the glass door opened and there she was, long legs, expensive perfume, barely old enough to rent a car. She tilted her head and smiled at me like I was invisible. "Did someone order coffee?" she said, holding a tray like a model in a TV commercial. Then she turned to David, my husband, and winked. I stood still. My hands still smelled like Windex, my stomach like iron. He didn't look at me. Not really. Just muttered, "Julia, can you give us a moment?" No, honey. No, thanks. Not even eye contact. I walked past them. Her perfume hit me like fog, and just as I turned the corner, I heard her whisper to him, laughing, "She looks like someone's mum who never got the memo it's 2023. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not with rage, but with clarity. Let me rewind. My name is Julia Sanders. I've been married to David for 29 years. I raised 2 daughters, gave up my own career in HR to support his startup dream, cooked, cleaned, cheered, budgeted, built, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being seen. Until that laugh, until that girl Heather, and until a promotion 2 floors up landed in my inbox that very same afternoon. See, what Heather didn't know was this. She wasn't just some office flirtation. She was now part of my team, and I was her new boss. I didn't ask for revenge. I didn't even want it. But what followed wasn't payback. It was power, quiet power, and this is how I found it. The sun was too bright for how I felt inside. We were at Margot's Cafe, one of those charming but overpriced places that David liked to pretend was casual. It wasn't. "Julia, try the scallops. You always liked them," he said, sliding the menu toward me. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Across the table, our daughter Rachel was beaming. "I found a place for the wedding, by the lake. It's small but intimate. Rustic wood, but with chandeliers. Very me, right?" David lit up. "That sounds amazing, sweetheart." I smiled, but I wasn't there. I was still in his office, still hearing that girl's voice, still smelling her perfume vanilla musk and something sharper, like smugness. "Mum!" Rachel's voice pulled me back. "You okay? You've barely touched your water." I nodded. "Just tired. Long week." David cleared his throat. "Julia's been helping with the training program at headquarters. New restructuring. Lots of moving parts." He said it like a compliment, but there was distance in his voice, like he wanted credit for defending me without actually being close to me. Rachel reached over and touched my hand. "You've always been the glue, Mom." That nearly broke me, because glue is invisible until it dries out. I looked at David. "You hiring anyone new in admin?" He blinked. "Admin? Someone named Heather?" There was a pause. His lips pressed together, just barely. Then, "Oh, she's just temping through a staffing agency. Bright kid. Young." Rachel smiled. "Is she pretty?" David chuckled. "Well, the office doesn't mind her being around." I set down my fork. "How old is she?" He didn't answer right away. 24, I think. Maybe 25. And that's when I realized something terrifying. He didn't even try to lie. That night, I folded laundry like it mattered. Rachel's old college t-shirt still smelled faintly of vanilla and fabric softener. David's shirts. Nothing. Like the man who wore them wasn't coming back. I sat on the edge of the bed, a cardigan half folded in my lap. It was one I used to wear when Rachel was sick. She used to pull the sleeve over her tiny hands like a blanket. She was grown now, planning a wedding, living 2 cities away. The door creaked open and David stepped in, loosening his tie. "Long day?" I didn't answer. He sat on the opposite end of the bed, scrolling through his phone. I spoke before I could stop myself. "Heather, Are you sleeping with her? His thumb paused mid-scroll. He looked up. Don't do that. Don't do what? Make something out of nothing. David, I said, my voice even. You didn't answer the question. He stood up, rubbed the back of his neck, then walked toward the bathroom. You always turn things into drama, Julia. This is why it's hard to talk to you. Click. The bathroom door closed, and with that sound, so did something in me. I wasn't angry. I was tired, the kind of tired that sits in your bones. When he emerged 20 minutes later, I was already under the covers, turned away. He didn't say goodnight. The next morning, I skipped making breakfast for the first time in 22 years, and David didn't notice. He walked out the door with his briefcase and his silence, like I'd become part of the furniture he'd stopped recognizing. The message came in at 9:14 a.m., a number I hadn't seen in years. Angela Linton. Back in college, we used to say we'd run HR departments together one day, her with her blazer and big ideas, me with my notebooks and quiet instincts. I clicked play. Her voice hadn't changed. Jules? Long time. Listen, we're opening a new branch in Portland. I know it's been a while, but I remembered how you handled that merger mess in '97. Would love to pick your brain maybe, more than that. Lunch this week. I stared at the phone. David had never even asked about my HR work, not once. But Angela, she remembered. I opened the closet, pulled out a blouse I hadn't touched since Rachel's high school graduation. Dusty blue, buttoned at the neck. It still fit. That afternoon, I took the car. Not David's, mine. The one I'd barely used because we didn't need two cars after I left the firm. The moment I walked into that little cafe on 7th and Grant, it was like my spine remembered how to stand. Angela waved from the back booth, already mid-sentence in a call, already powerful. She hung up and beamed. Still got that quiet steel, huh? I laughed. Maybe just quiet rust at this point. We talked like no time had passed, about mergers, conflicts, policies, people. I heard myself talk and didn't recognize the voice. It was strong, precise, curious. At one point, she leaned in, lowered her voice. You're not still with David, are you? I nodded slowly. She sat back. Jules, you're a weapon. I hope you remember that. I blinked. For a moment, I didn't know if I wanted to cry or laugh. And as I walked out of the cafe into the cold sun, I remembered something strange. I used to be someone. That night, I cooked salmon. For myself. David asked what the occasion was. I just said, I miss the taste. He didn't notice I'd poured my own wine. He didn't notice I was dressed differently, but I noticed. The receptionist smiled as I walked through the revolving glass door. Julia Thomas? She asked. I nodded. Angela said you might arrive early. Conference room B. She's finishing up a hiring call. It was the kind of place where everything smelled like ambition. Polished tile, clacking heels, bitter coffee. I hadn't stood in a place like this in over 15 years, and yet I didn't feel lost. I felt awake. In conference room B, the long table gleamed. A little tent card read, Julia Thomas, Senior Consultant, Integration Strategy. Consultant, not assistant, not wife, not afterthought. Just then, I heard the elevator doors open across the atrium. Two voices. Laughter. The one I recognized made my breath stop. Heather. Her voice was high and sweet, tinged with the same forced confidence she used that night at the gala. Oh, I'm just popping in. He's still stuck in court. David's always stuck somewhere. I froze. Angela poked her head in. You okay? Just surprised to see Heather. Angela frowned. Heather? She's David's. She's the woman. Angela's mouth flattened. She's here? She asked quietly. I nodded. Angela gave me a slow smile. Well then, she said. You ready to make her sit up straight? Before I could answer, Heather's laugh came closer. The door swung open. Oh, hey, Angela said I could drop these off. She stopped mid-sentence. Our eyes met. Her face dropped. Just a flicker, but enough. I didn't flinch. I reached forward and extended my hand. Julia Thomas, senior consultant. She blinked. Then, almost too fast, she recovered. Oh, wow, you're here. That's unexpected. Angela stepped in. Julia's consulting on the post-merger cultural shift. We need her expertise. I turned slightly, just enough to angle the clipboard toward her. My name, my title. Heather's eyes caught it. The way her lips twitched said more than words. She didn't know, and now she did. I hadn't touched instant coffee in a decade, but there I was, waiting for the Keurig to finish brewing a generic hazelnut pod in the break room. The office was quiet. The tension from the Heather incident still pulsed behind my ribs like a distant drumbeat. My phone buzzed, unknown caller. I normally wouldn't answer, but something about the moment, about the stillness made me tap the green button. Julia. The voice was soft, husky with age. I paused. Yes, it's Myra. Myra Feldman. From Glenhaven. It took a moment. Then it hit me. Myra. Myra from the PTA. Myra from synagogue. Myra, who used to bring over lentil soup when I had the flu. Myra, oh my God, how are you? I heard, she said gently. He left you. I sat down. I didn't mean to intrude, she added quickly, but I saw it in the alumni bulletin, and I remembered what you did for me back when Martin had the stroke. I closed my eyes. I'd picked her kids up from school for 2 weeks straight, run errands, cooked chicken soup in her own kitchen when she couldn't stand. Thank you, I whispered. She exhaled slowly. I've never forgotten it. And I heard you're back. Consulting. I blinked. Yes. I just started again. Well, she chuckled. Our firm is about to implode with this merger. If you have an opening, I'd love to talk. I froze. Not because I didn't want the work, but because I realised people remembered, even after everything, even when David forgot me, or Heather mocked me, or my reflection looked like someone I barely knew, there were people who had seen the real me, still did. Before we hung up, she added, and Julia, you always had the steel. I just hope you remember it now. I sat there, phone resting on the table, the hazelnut cup now cold beside me. I didn't go back to my desk right away. Instead, I wandered down the hallway and into the small side office no one really used, just a couple chairs and a forgotten ficus leaning toward a dusty window. I sat. The words floated back. You always had the steel. Funny. For months I'd been walking around like a cardboard version of myself, folded, flimsy, disposable. Now here I was, rooted in a cheap chair, feeling heavier than ever. But not the bad kind of heavy, the kind that said, I still exist. I pulled out my old planner from my bag, the one I'd stopped using the day David told me he was reconnecting with someone he met on his South Carolina retreat. I flipped past empty pages until I found one lined with faint ink smudges, remnants of goals I'd once had. Lunch with Karen, Thursday. Pitch to Argo Tech. Buy Heather birthday card. Heather. Just seeing her name made my stomach harden, but also, there it was again. A dull ache, almost regret, sitting under my ribs like a stone wrapped in velvet. I didn't hate her. Not truly. I hated what I let happen. I hated what I'd silenced in myself. That planner, that hallway, that dusty window all whispered the same thing. You knew how to fight. You just stopped thinking you were worth the fight. And that's when I wrote it down, in fresh ink. Call Myra, confirm meeting, then, beneath it, clean house. Not the literal kind, but the life kind. The part where I stopped apologizing for not being younger, not being shinier, not being new. The part where I remembered that power wasn't volume, it was consistency. It was not backing down when someone smirked in your face. It was showing up again and again until the world had to look back, and I would. Because if I'd spent decades building others raising Heather, supporting David, running teams, I could rebuild myself too, even stronger. Maybe not as fast. But steel never is. The office lobby hadn't changed. Same faux marble floor, same humming light above the reception desk, same glass double doors that I once waited behind heart racing, eyes low, hoping I didn't run into her. But this time, I was the one holding the clipboard. "Good morning," I told the young man behind the front desk. He blinked. "Oh, you're here for the team rollout meeting." I smiled. "I'm leading it." His eyebrows lifted just enough. Inside the boardroom, they'd already started assembling. I could hear the soft murmurs through the frosted wall, people unzipping laptop bags, chatting about the new leadership transition. They didn't know yet. Then came the sound of her voice. Heather. That light, practiced giggle. The one that used to echo in my hallway when she called David late at night. The one I'd overheard as I passed the kitchen while he whispered back, "I'm just helping her find a job. She's bright." I stood still for a second, not out of fear, but because something strange happened. I didn't shake, not anymore. Instead, I took a deep breath and opened the door. Her eyes were the first thing I saw, wider than before. Frozen, mouth parted ever so slightly. The room turned one by one. Some half stood, some fumbled their water bottles. I walked to the front of the room and placed the clipboard on the table. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice even. "I'm Julia Latham. I'll be overseeing the integration phase of this restructuring." Heather's lips moved, but no sound came out. A man next to her, the marketing director, if I remembered right, shifted in his seat, clearly sensing the tension. And then she spoke. "You're the new VP?" I met her eyes. "I thought you said I was a washed-up ex-wife with no edge left," I said softly. Apparently, the board disagreed. A few jaws dropped. The room went completely still, and in that silence, I smiled. Because silence was no longer my enemy. It was my entrance music. After the meeting adjourned, most of the staff filed out, quickly murmurs trailing behind them like perfume. But Heather lingered. Of course she did. She approached slowly, as if walking through glass. Her heels didn't click. They whispered. "I didn't know," she said. Her voice had that carefully constructed innocence I remembered all too well. "That I was qualified?" I asked. She flinched. "That you were this Julia?" I tilted my head. "Ah, not the one crying in her car outside your apartment complex." She didn't respond, but her eyes drifted to the side, toward the corner table, the one by the window, and there it was. A small, tarnished brass frame. Inside, a photo of my daughter, age 12, with me at the company family picnic. I stared. That photo had disappeared from David's home office years ago. I'd looked for it when I packed, and now it was sitting on Heather's desk next to her planner and colour-coded sticky notes. "I found it in a box David left," she mumbled, sensing the shift. "Didn't know it was yours." I walked over slowly, picked it up. The brass was cool in my hand. My thumbnail ran along the bottom where the engraving used to be. J and K, first win. The letters had dulled, but they hadn't vanished. Funny, isn't it? What survives? "You kept this on your desk?" I asked, not looking at her. She crossed her arms. "It inspired me. You looked strong." I was. She fell silent again. I turned, photo in hand. "You know, Heather. I gave you the benefit of the doubt. Back then, I thought maybe you didn't know I existed." "I did," she whispered. There it was. Not a scream, not a slap, just a quiet, ruinous confession. I was afraid, she added. You seemed like the kind of woman who never lost. I gave a soft laugh. I did, but only for a while. And with that, I tucked the photo into my leather notebook right beside the new contract folders. Not stolen, not reclaimed, just restored. The next morning, I arrived early. I wanted a moment alone in the office, just me, the coffee machine, and the morning light slipping through the blinds. But someone was already there. A young woman, mid-20s, sharp blazer, coral lipstick, sat at the front desk, typing furiously. Her name tag read, Maddie. She was Heather's new executive assistant. She looked up, paused. Oh, hi, she said slowly. Didn't know anyone came in this early. I do, I replied, smiling faintly. Always have, just not to this office, until now. She smiled back, but it didn't reach her eyes. I stepped toward the break room. As I poured my coffee, I overheard her whisper into her headset, She's here already. Yeah, her. The one who replaced Heather's boss. Silence. Then, no, I didn't think she'd last long either. I froze mid-pour. My hand trembled slightly, coffee dripping onto the counter. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Later that morning, during the team briefing, Maddie brought in the weekly printouts late. Her eyes didn't meet mine, but she handed the stack to Heather first. Protocol breach. Nothing major, but deliberate. Heather noticed too. Her brows twitched just for a second. Then she turned to me and said, Julia, would you like to walk the team through the revised budget realignments? I nodded. Of course. As I stood up, I noticed Maddie whisper something to another intern, something followed by a brief smirk. A micro-act, a passing ripple. But it was enough. After the meeting, I found her in the kitchenette. I didn't raise my voice. Morning, Maddie. She turned. Yes. You're Heather's assistant, right? She nodded. And I'm the interim regional director, correct? Another nod, slower this time. I leaned slightly closer. Then we're going to start again, with respect and clarity. Understood? She blinked. Yes, Ma'am. I smiled, soft but firm. Good, because my threshold for pettiness is lower than my tolerance for caffeine, and I've already had 2 cups. She laughed nervously, but her eyes registered it. This wasn't the Julia from whispered calls and second-hand rumours. This was the woman who'd once raised a company from nothing and was learning how to do it again. The Monday management meeting started late. I took my seat at the head of the table. Clipboard in hand, notes ready. Heather walked in 5 minutes after the hour, immaculate as ever, calm. But her eyes were red-rimmed, and she didn't acknowledge me. Then came the second surprise. David. He entered as if this was normal, pulling out a chair beside Heather and adjusting his cufflinks like nothing had happened. The same cufflinks I'd bought him on our 10th anniversary. The air changed, subtle. Like oxygen had thinned, Heather cleared her throat. This is David Lanning. He'll be joining us as an external strategic advisor temporary assignment. A few heads turned, 1 or 2 widened. I didn't blink. Good to see you, David. He gave me a small nod. Likewise, Julia. I've heard things have changed around here. I returned the nod. They have. The room quieted. I launched into the budget revisions allocations, cuts, the realignment of marketing toward legacy clients. Heather interrupted mid-sentence. Wouldn't that be risky? I mean, if we shift that much toward legacy, we lose our startup edge. David added smoothly, She makes a fair point. The brand's value is built on forward momentum. I let the silence hold, then said, Forward doesn't always mean away. Sometimes momentum means circling back to what still works. The team looked back and forth between us like watching tennis. Heather's smile was thin. We'll take it under advisement. I closed the folder slowly. We won't take it under advisement. It's already approved. Then I turned toward David, my voice even. If you'd like a walkthrough of the rationale later, I'd be happy to show you how this version of the company runs. He didn't respond immediately. Then, that might be helpful. The meeting moved on, but the power lines had redrawn themselves. As the group began to disband, Heather leaned toward me. "This isn't your old company anymore," she whispered. I leaned in, voice just above breath. "Number, it's not. But you're not the same girl who used to fetch my dry cleaning either. We've both grown." She blinked. Something flickered. Memory. Anger. I stood up, gathered my things, and left her sitting there. Later that afternoon, Heather requested a one-on-one to align perspectives. I agreed, for documentation purposes. She brought David. We sat in my new office. The view behind me stretched over the city. It made Heather look small, despite her confidence. David opened first. "Julia, I want to be clear. I came here because of the opportunity, not because of nostalgia." I nodded. "Of course." He shifted in his seat. "Back in 2008, remember that investor pitch in Denver? You wore that burgundy dress. You had a cold and still carried the whole room." Heather rolled her eyes. "Can we focus?" David blinked. "Right. Sorry. Just context." Heather folded her arms. "I've built my space here, Julia. Earned it. You disappeared for a decade. Now you're back, and everything shifts." I tilted my head. "Is this about the job, or something else?" She hesitated, then looked directly at me. "My mother left when I was 9, she said. She dropped me at my aunt's and just vanished." I stayed still. "She didn't come back until I graduated high school. By then, I already learned one thing. Women like you always leave." The room went quiet. Even David seemed unsure what to say. Heather continued. "You treated me like a mentee, then vanished. David said you were chasing healing, but I saw it as you abandoning what you started." I exhaled slowly. I didn't vanish. I broke. She looked away. David cleared his throat. "Maybe this isn't productive," I replied, calm but firm. "No, David, it is. It's more honest than most of our marriage." He flinched, briefly. Heather stood. "Look, you want the CEO seat back. Fine. But don't act like you're the only one who sacrificed." And then came the line that struck deeper than she knew. I built this place without a mother, without a mentor. I did it alone. I stood walking to the window. I didn't speak for a while. Then, that's the saddest power I've ever seen. Building everything from absence. That bouquet sat quietly on the corner of my desk all morning. Tulips, yellow, the kind David brought to the hospital after my miscarriage, the ones I threw in the trash, then later picked out again, one by one. I didn't mention them, neither did he. By late afternoon, Heather stopped by again. Her knock was softer this time. "I didn't mean to unload earlier," she said, but I had to say it. I gestured to the chair across from me. "You did." She sat, but didn't relax. "You once told me," she started, eyes scanning the carpet, "that control is a way to survive pain. That stuck with me." I looked up. I had said that. Back in 2014, during a mentorship brunch, I'd told her, half laughing, "Control is my armor. I only survive by holding all the pieces." She continued, "I used to think you were cold, calculated, but maybe you were just afraid." I let that hang in the room. Heather crossed her legs, slowly. "I'm not used to people coming back. I didn't think you would." I nodded. "I almost didn't." Silence again. Then she whispered, barely audible. It's easier to be angry than to admit you missed someone. That sentence hit something in me I hadn't acknowledged, because I'd said it too. Once, to a therapist, years ago, I leaned forward. Heather, I see the woman you've become. You built something strong, maybe brittle in places, but strong. She blinked. And you? I smiled faintly, still learning not to lead from fear. She stood, adjusted her blouse. Well, we'll see if we can lead it together. Before she walked out, she glanced at the tulips. Those from David? She asked casually. I shrugged. No card. But some things don't need one. She left without another word. But that echo control is how I survive pain was still bouncing in the room long after she was gone. The next morning, I wore the grey blazer, the one with a loose thread on the sleeve that I never bothered to fix. David once said it made me look unapproachable. Today, I needed that. The tulip I'd pressed in the planner was still there. I didn't take it with me, but the shape of it lingered in my mind like a pressed memory. As I walked through the glass doors of Orion Consulting, heads turned, not dramatically, just that subtle shift. The kind where someone tries to pretend they're not surprised to see you back. I didn't need to announce anything. The memo had gone out. Julia V. Renshaw returns as Interim Strategy Director. Heather had agreed to it, quietly, no fanfare. I stepped into the elevator. A young analyst I didn't recognise offered a stiff nod. Ma'am? I smiled faintly. Just Julia. The real test waited on the 5th floor. Conference Room B. There they were. Alan, Rosa, Tanisha, Mark, the mid-managers who had, for the past 2 years, followed Heather's direction like GPS, not maliciously, just habitually. I stood at the head of the table but didn't speak right away. They waited. I opened my planner and laid it down. A page was marked with a folded corner. I didn't touch it. I won't be undoing what Heather's built, I began, voice steady. This isn't a purge, it's a rebalancing. No one interrupted. I looked at Mark. You once told me consensus was overrated. I disagreed. But I see now you were right. A flicker crossed his face. Respect. Surprise. Tanisha, I continued, you wrote a client proposal last year that secured Amley and Sons. It was nearly thrown out until Heather pushed it through. That mattered. She nodded slowly. I'm not here to erase. I'm here because this team deserves stability, not silence, not guessing games. Rosa glanced down. Her pen tapped once, then stopped. Alan finally spoke. You're different. I met his eyes. Grief does that. Another pause. Then, welcome back, Julia. 3 words. But from Alan, they were everything. When I returned to my new office, my old one, really, the air felt still. Not hostile, not welcoming, just untouched. The assistant had left a small vase on the side table. In it, 1 yellow tulip. Not my doing. I didn't sit at the desk immediately. I walked around, brushing my hand across the window frame. There was a fingerprint smudge still there, possibly mine from months ago. Or maybe hers. Then came the knock. Quiet, measured. Heather stood at the doorway. No clipboard, no iPad. Just herself, in a muted grey dress and flats I hadn't seen before. May I? She asked. I nodded once. She walked in slowly, taking in the room like a stranger in a familiar museum. Her eyes landed on the planner open to the same page I'd used during my final week before the diagnosis. She didn't comment. Then something happened. She reached out briefly and adjusted the angle of the picture frame on the desk, the one with my daughter, back when she was 10, holding a balloon that said, CEO in training. She hadn't touched that frame in years. I'm not here to fight, Heather said quietly. I just needed to see it. The space again. I let the silence hang. She added, I used to think ambition could protect me from everything. Her fingers hovered above the edge of the desk. She didn't sit. I responded softly. And did it? Heather looked at the tulip. It helped until it didn't. Then she turned to leave. At the door, she paused. You've always known when to lean in, Julia. I'm still learning that. No apology, but something else. A fracture in the mask, and sometimes that's louder than I'm sorry. When she left, I sat down for the first time that day. I didn't touch the tulip. The envelope sat untouched for hours. I'd walked past it 5 times, once with coffee, once with my bag, once pretending I didn't care. But curiosity, it whispers. When I finally slit it open, inside was a single note on thick cream paper. Leadership isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision not to become who hurt you. No name. But the handwriting. Unmistakably Heather's. I let the paper rest on the desk beside the planner and that tilted photo frame. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was surviving the room. I was inhabiting it again. Outside the glass walls, the office buzzed with movement. I hadn't noticed it before, how the rhythm of this place returned without my needing to force it. People were adapting, not because I demanded it, but because space had been made for balance. A soft knock. This time it was Madison, the intern who once spilled coffee on my blazer and nearly cried over it. I updated the Q3 briefs, Ms. Carter, she said, voice steady. I smiled. Thank you, Madison. And you can call me Julia. Just don't spill the coffee again. She laughed, relieved, then paused. It's good to have you back. That moment? I felt it more than any boardroom applause. It wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about what I chose to bring back with me and what I chose to leave behind. I glanced at the yellow tulip again, still fresh. Instead of tossing it, I pulled the vase closer, slid it near the window where the light hit just right. And not everything needed pruning. Some things, like strength, just needed to be seen clearly. That weekend, I didn't open my laptop, didn't check email, didn't even touch the planner. Instead, I sat in my sunlit kitchen, the same one where years ago my daughter used to braid my hair before school events, before the world taught her that polished buns and broken truths sometimes come as a set. The silence in the house wasn't empty. It was earned. From the dining table, I could see out into the backyard. A few of my late husband's old stepping stones still formed a crooked path near the shed. One was chipped, another overgrown. Funny how even broken things hold direction. The kettle whistled gently. I poured 2 mugs out of habit, I guess, and placed one across from mine. It wasn't for anyone specific, but maybe it was for the part of me that hadn't been listened to in years. Or maybe for the woman I used to be, before I became the cheated-on wife, or the tough boss, or the one who made it through. The air felt warmer than usual. Maybe it was spring, or maybe it was the way I'd stopped expecting closure to be loud. Later, I walked down to the bookstore on Maple, the small, dusty one with handwritten signs and uneven floors. I hadn't been in there since my 40s. The owner, still there, gave me a gentle nod. Been a while, he said. I smiled. Been busy, forgetting who I was. He handed me a copy of Women Who Run with the Wolves without a word. Back home, I placed the book on the same table as the planner. Not stacked, just near it. Like 2 versions of myself learning how to sit beside each other. The doorbell rang. I startled a little. Not from fear, from how long it had been since someone visited without an agenda. I opened the door. It was Lily, my niece. The one who once wrote me a note on a napkin that said, Aunt Julia, you make bad days better. She looked older now, her eyes softer. She held a plant in a pot lavender, I think. I thought maybe you'd want some colour in the kitchen, she said shyly. I stepped aside, smiling. Only if you stay and tell me everything I missed. She walked in, and I swear for just a second, the house felt like it had a heartbeat again. Lily sat at my kitchen table, sipping tea from a chipped mug that once belonged to my mother. The lavender she brought sat in the centre, a soft little explosion of calm. The planner, still closed, had been nudged slightly to make room for her elbows. I watched her trace her finger along the edge of the ceramic, like she was trying to memorize something she couldn't quite name. She always told me you were too serious, Lily said, glancing up, that you worked too hard, that you expected people to be better than they were. I tilted my head, unsure if I was being criticized or remembered. And you? I asked gently. Lily shrugged. I think you were the only adult who ever apologized when you were wrong. I remember when you forgot my birthday once. You brought me a sandwich with a note that said, "I'm trying. Not perfect, still love you." I hadn't thought about that in years. And now, she continued, her voice softening, I work in HR. I write policies that protect people like you used to protect me. I blinked. You work in HR? Lily smiled. Yeah, I make sure the quiet ones get heard, the ones who cry after meetings, the ones who pretend they're fine because no one asks twice. Something swelled in my chest, something old, proud, and aching. She looked down into her tea. Heather doesn't know who you are. Not really. She knows your title, your posture, maybe your address. But not that you stayed with her uncle through chemo, or that you walked me to school when my mum forgot. I swallowed. The planner suddenly felt heavy behind her elbow. Then, maybe I failed, I whispered. Lily shook her head. Number U just planted seeds in places you weren't watching. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a faded napkin, the very one she wrote on as a child. Aunt Julia, you make bad days better. I laughed, then cried. I keep it in my work ID badge, Lily said. So when I have a bad meeting, I remember who taught me that kindness doesn't need permission. And just like that, the girl I used to braid hair for had braided something back into me. Later that week, I found myself walking the halls of my office building, not in my old suit, not with a badge, not even with purpose, just visiting. Lily had invited me to a small HR workshop, nothing fancy, 10 chairs, one whiteboard, and a tray of grocery store cookies. But what drew my eyes wasn't the cookies or the chairs. It was the young woman in the back, Heather's daughter. Her name tag read Mila. Same sharp jawline, same posture, but the eyes, those weren't Heather's. They were scanning, observant, and a little nervous. I kept to the corner. When the session ended, Lily called Mila over. I braced myself, unsure what role I was about to play. Stranger? Ghost? Warning? But Mila just smiled and said, I've heard about you, from Lily. Oh? I said, steadying my voice. She said you once told her, be kind when you're tired. That's when it counts most. I wrote it down. She reached into her coat and showed me her phone. A pinned note. Your words. I think I want to be someone like that. Mila said, even if it skips a generation. I smiled, stunned, unsure whether to laugh or ache. As she left, she paused by the lavender bouquet Lily had brought for the table. She leaned in, gently straightened the stems, then walked out without a word. It was such a small act, quiet, intentional, familiar. That's when I noticed her mother, Heather, standing just outside the glass door. I hadn't seen her arrive. She wasn't storming in, nor waiting to speak, just watching. Her face unreadable until she reached up, slowly, and pressed her palm to the glass. She didn't wave, didn't enter. But something in that gesture open hand, no force felt, like an apology spoken through silence, regret without words. I looked back at Myla, already halfway down the hall, then back at Heather. The glass between us felt oddly symbolic. We'd never see eye to eye, but maybe, just maybe, that's okay, because her daughter, the next page, was already writing a better chapter. I sat at the kitchen table that night, the planner open in front of me. It had been years since I'd looked at it as anything more than a to-do list. Meetings, appointments, school drop-offs, meal plans. But now, each scribbled line felt like a version of myself I used to rush past. At the very back on a page I didn't remember using was a sticky note, faintly yellowed, as if it had been there for years. In careful handwriting that wasn't mine, it read, "You were never just a role. You were a person." I see that now. There was no name, no date, just that one sentence. For a long moment, I didn't breathe. Then, slowly, I closed the planner, wrapped it in the soft scarf Lily gave me, and tucked it onto the shelf, not out of sight, but out of need. I wasn't holding on anymore. I was releasing. Outside, the wind had picked up. Fall leaves scattered across the porch. The air smelled of cinnamon and cold. From the living room came the faint clinking of mugs. Lily and Myla were making hot cocoa. I didn't go to them right away. I let myself sit with the quiet, and in that quiet, I didn't feel empty. I felt free. Not because I'd won, not because Heather had apologised, but because, for the first time in years, I stopped needing permission to rest. If you've ever poured your whole life into others and wondered who you are when they no longer need you, this story is for you. You're not invisible. You're not replaceable. You're still here, and that matters more than you know.